Now, if you missed it, recently ESPN broke news that Hal Biagas, the executive director of the LCS Players Association, will not be reelected. Following this information, I actually kind of started asking around about what was going on with the Players Association because, well, I haven't heard much recently. And what I learned is that Riot will no longer be funding the Players Association anymore. Let's talk about what that means. Okay, so for those of you that don't know what the Players Association is, the LCS Players Association, and why it was created and why Riot funds it, let's actually just throw back to June of 2017 when a very, very attractive person sat down with members of Riot and team owners to discuss the formation of this whole thing. Maybe you guys can provide a little bit of context on what this is for those just tuning in.
What we're doing, in short, is investing and putting money into a players association that the pros are going to run and operate, and the hope is for it to be independent. And this association, the players will get to pick who will represent them when we're talking with ownership group, and we're trying to maybe tackling certain issues going forward for the league. So it sort of gives them that voice, and it also provides an organization to help just players' lives. So gives them access to, whether it's vetted legal services or, business advice or a myriad of things that we think will be helpful for pros as they enter their career as an LCS pro, but also as they sort of continue on and they're facing different challenges over the course of their career. We think that the association is a great sort of big step to really make sure that pros have someone looking out for them that's not just owners and Riot. And so ultimately, net, we think pros are actually going to really benefit from this.
Yeah. So if you didn't miss it, the Players Association was always actually meant to be independent and eventually move to independence. So it hasn't for the past 3 years, and it doesn't seem like there's a particular reason why it is happening now. Other than that, I've heard through sources that Riot is kind of underwhelmed by how the Players Association has functioned over the past 3 years. It's also important to note, by the way, that there's at least one final payment that Riot intends to make to the Players Association, and while the exact amount of this payment is unknown, it is believed to be at least more than a quarter's worth of support. I also want to point out that the current LCS Players Association president, Darshan, tweeted out recently that next week, maybe the second most important election will be happening, which is the executive committee election for the Players Association, and they're going to actually be voting on the roles of president, vice president, treasurer, and 2 executive committee members. I've asked both Riot and Darshan for statements on the issue. Let's start with Riot first. They said, quote, "When we first announced that we were going to support players in building the North American League of Legends Championship Series Players Association, the NALCSPA, by the way, very long name, back in 2017, we were headed into uncharted territory. When the LCS became a permanent partnership ecosystem, we knew it was important that our pro players had a strong voice within our league, with an association that focused on their needs. Although we're supportive of the actions that the Players Association helped to fuel, many of them behind the scenes, like individual advocacy for players and complex contract disputes or representing the group's views to owners and Riot alike, we think that the Players Association is at a point of inflection and that our relationship with the organization needs to change as well. As a league, we're ending our current funding agreement with the PA. We have a final payment left to make to the PA, which will provide us with time to work with the LCS Players Association leadership team about what our relationship will look like going forward. In the meantime, we'll continue to work with the LCS Players Association in the same way that we have over the past few years." So that's from Commissioner Greeley, and that was supplied to me when I reached out to Riot. Here's what happened when I reached out to Darshan, the president of the LCS Players Association. "The goal was never for Riot to fund the Players Association long term, which creates a conflict of interest. However, we are in the process of negotiating a new agreement with Riot, and there is still potential to receive more funding. There's already more than enough funding to go through the next calendar year. The Players Association is taking this opportunity to completely rebuild from the ground up. Everything from the hiring process to our vision is going to be examined and updated. I believe that there is so much value that could be created for the players and the scene as a whole with the help of the Players Association. And we can't wait to show what can be done this next year. I see the Players Association as a wave that not only moves the players forward, but the whole NA LOL esports scene and everyone in it. Okay, so there's the facts. Let's get into sort of my analysis or opinion on all of this stuff. And before I do that, I should let you know that I'm going to be doing an interview with Darshan. He's agreed to do one. I'm going to be filming that later today, and we'll release that at a later date, maybe a little bit after finals, a couple days. So be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss that, because if you're watching this video, maybe you should watch that one too. So first off, I think it's safe to say that the Players Association has been a bit of a disappointment. And that is not like just my opinion. It is one that I get whenever I talk to a lot of different people in the scene, people at Riot, people among the players, among the teams. It just generally feels like even if they have accomplished some things, which the ESPN article kind of listed, the general sentiment within the LCS, at least from what I can tell, is that the association is not, I don't know, it's not taken too seriously. In fact, you don't have to go too far back on my YouTube channel to find interviews that I did with members of the executive committee where they are kind of laughing at the idea of this whole thing. So it doesn't surprise me also, by the way, that they voted out the former executive director, Halby August, because when I spoke to numerous players about his role within the Players Association, there tended to be this feeling of like, wow, he is not doing as much as perhaps he could given the amount of money that is getting paid to him in this role. I'm kind of curious about Darshan's statement too, because in it he seems to imply that they are going to Riot and trying to secure additional funding potentially, by saying that there's the potential of that in the future. Riot's, what I've heard is that they don't really intend to pay more than this final payment, and their statement does kind of feel like they're, I don't know, maybe there's some room there where they can actually help contribute a little bit. But the thing that's kind of weird to me about this is like the players actually make a pretty good amount of money. I believe the league minimum now is something like 75K a year that players make. And yes, everyone has talked about that 400K number, but very clearly like the amount of money that the players are making, in part now because there are agents, should be enough to cover the cost of operating this thing, and especially depending on who they end up trying to hire in that new executive director role. Now, I don't know if they're going to build out additional staff or if they're just going to hire one person, but given what this workload seems to be right now, even if they increased it a ton, it doesn't feel like it would take very much money to pay somebody to manage the whole thing, potentially even full time, depending on who it is that you're trying to get. All that to say, like, I am hopeful, because in talking sort of behind the scenes, the word is that, much like what Darshan said in his statement, players are perhaps starting to take the Players Association more seriously. There is a desire to make this thing more functional and to accomplish more and better represent and support the players that are, members of it. So we'll have to see if that ends up happening. But I do think like this is a really interesting moment, because there's kind of two paths that the Players Association could take here. All the players could say, well, we weren't really using it that much anyway. We can all talk to each other. Why do we need to hire somebody? And then, not actually spend very much money on it. Or they could invest into this thing, try to support it, try to grow it. And we'll have to see what they decide to do. But again, stay tuned for that Darshan interview. Thank you to Alienware for sponsoring this video. And stay tuned for more coverage of the off-season. Everyone, and welcome to the unboxing with Travis Gafford. We have received several awesome products from Alienware, and we're gonna unbox this stuff. I'm trying to keep my voice down because Kobe's asleep, but let's open up this first box first before we get to the computer. So here's what we got: Alienware 510M, this other 510M mouse, 3 of these guys. That's right, everybody, the 610M. Next up, the 310H headset, another 310H, a third 310H. So this is the 510K keyboard. Okay, it is time to open the premier item of the evening. So what we have here is the Aurora R11. It has a 10th gen Intel Core i9 10900KF. I want to actually show you guys the card that is inside of this. This is what's cool. You take this one screw out, you lift this, and the side panel pops out. And here is the beautiful baby. What you're looking at is a 3080. This is the latest and greatest from NVIDIA. This is 128 gigabytes of RAM. Is that stupid? So the hard drive hangs out on the side, so you can just slide it in. The NVMe drive, it's really hard to see, but it's right behind the graphics card. These are expansion slots if you want to add in traditional SSDs. So anyway, that's the 3080 Aurora R11. Very big fan. We're going to close this up, and then I'm going to try to turn it on and see if we can get it going. Ta-da!